Hey cats, what's happening? It is a beautiful day. Summer's coming on and it's getting warm. I got a story for you today. It goes back to my childhood. In fact, it goes back to 1965. It's probably a long time ago for some of you guys. So have a seat down here on this old picnic table next to me. We'll look out here at the pond and I'll tell you this tale. Now, this is a true story. I grew up in Hinckley, Ohio. My dad worked for the Cleveland Metro Parks, and we rented a house there in the park in Hinckley. And Hinckley Metro Park is known for the Whips ledges. The ledges are probably over a half mile of sandstone cliffs and outcroppings that run along a big long ridge there. And we lived in a house that was up above the ledges, but probably within a quarter mile. So as kids, it was easy for us to hike through the woods, and boom, we'd be right there in the Whips ledges. And that was our backyard playground. I mean, as boys would, we knew every nook and cranny of those ledges. We knew where every cave was, every crevasse, every cliff that we could scale. And it's a popular place for weekend hikers, for rock climbers, that like to string their ropes up and climb the cliffs. So it could get pretty busy there sometimes. Now, back in 1965, there happened to be a group. It was from a foster home. It was actually like a Methodist boys' home for foster kids in Cleveland, Ohio. And they were going on a field trip. They weren't going to the Hinckley Ledges, but along their way, the bus got a flat tire, and it just so happened it was right there close within the proximity of the Whips ledges. So they decided to detour their field trip and let the boys hike at the Whips ledges. Well, there was a young lad by the name of Morris, and he was with the group. He had been his parents had left him in 1955, so he had been a foster kid for at least 10 years. And he decided to take his buddy and go off exploring on his own. Now, in the Whips Ledges, there's a pretty famous cave there. It's called Wildcat Cave. It has a great big mouth-like opening that you could go into, and it's still there today. But it's limited as to how far you can go into it today, because after this incident, most of the cave has been sealed off with concrete. But you could still go in the mouth of the cave. It's pretty big. I mean, you could probably fit about 10 people in there if you had to. You can't stand up there, but you could sit on a rock about like this, and then the ceiling of the cave's probably about right here if you're sitting. So you can stoop down and walk into the mouth of the cave, and it probably goes back maybe 15-20 feet before it's sealed off. Now, before it was sealed off, it went back and there was like a crevasse or a crack that dropped down about 3 foot, and it was maybe about 2 foot wide, maybe 18 inches wide, big enough that you could jump down into it. And then it followed this crack down into this cave. Now, in the Whips ledges, being that they're sandstone, it isn't like, Mammoth Cave or caves where you go in and see all the stalactites and everything. These caves are caused by fissures or cracks in the rock. So basically, it was just a big crack that opened up, maybe about 18, 20 inches wide, that you could go through. Now, I couldn't go through this way, but I'd have to turn sideways, and then I could, go through like this, sideways. And I went down, 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 and then it started coming up a little bit, and then there was a little pocket or a little room like that maybe 4 people could squeeze into, kind of claustrophobic. And if you continued on just a little bit further, you had to really do some crawling. There was another little room that maybe 1 or 2 people could fit in, but that was it. That was the end of the line. But as you followed this crevasse or this crack down into this cave, there was another crevasse that went off to the right, and it wasn't very wide at all. Most people wouldn't even think about going in there. But for some reason, Morris thought it was a cool idea to try to squeeze into this little side street, this little crevasse that went off to the side. Well, he started in there, and right off the bat, he lost his balance, and he fell like head first down into this crevasse. So his feet were facing up towards the main part of the cave, but his head was kind of aimed downhill. And being that it was such a narrow crack, he couldn't move his arms, he couldn't bend his legs, he was pretty much stuck. And nobody could reach him really to pull him out of there. So I'm not quite sure at this point how the situation went to where, he had to get help. It was obvious that he had to get help. I think at that point, numerous people tried to go down in there and figure out a way to reach him, to pull him out, but nobody could really get a good grip on him. Nobody could pull him out of there. Well, the whole ordeal ended up going on for almost 2 days. The poor kid was trapped in there, and being that his head was kind of downhill, he couldn't eat anything. They couldn't feed him anything. They couldn't give him any water or anything. He was really pretty helpless in there. The local authorities showed up, all kinds of ambulance vehicles. And I remember as a kid when it happened, because and my parents told us, they said, don't go back there, stay away from there. That's a busy place. There's a lot of ambulance and fire rescue back there, and you don't need to be in the way. Well, you know how kids are. We went back there anyway to see what was going on. The local news was there. They had big floodlights set up everywhere. They had cut a road from a parking lot to where they could get their ambulance vehicles through the woods all the way back to the top of this cave where they parked. And they worked, like I said, for almost 2 days trying to get the kid out of there. Finally, there was a couple of young, very spry, thin boys that were able to get in there. And they were able to loop some ropes around Morris. And they got a loop around his legs, and they got another loop around his shoulders. And they were able to pull and actually lift him up to where they could slide him out of that crevasse. It was no easy task, but they finally got him out of there. He was cold, he was tired, he was hungry, and he cried. he was happy to finally get out of that situation. Well, as long as I could remember, that cave was open to the public where people could go down in there. And if you went there on a Sunday afternoon, you had to wait in line for your turn, because only so many people could go in, and you couldn't pass anybody. So those that went in had to do their thing, and then they had to come back out, and then the next group of 2 or 3 people could go down in and come back out. And that's just how it was. But after that day, after Morris got trapped in there, the park decided that was it. No more people are going to go down in there. We're not taking the risk of anybody getting caught in that cave ever again. They tried to dynamite it. They put like 20 sticks of dynamite in there and blasted it, and it didn't do anything. It just basically made the cave a little bit bigger, but it didn't do anything to. They thought it would collapse the whole cave in, and that would be the end of it. But the dynamite trick didn't work. So they ended up bringing in a concrete mixer, and they just poured concrete back in the crevasse until they completely filled it and sealed off the entrance where you can't go down in there anymore. Now, I always wondered, I thought, well, what if you chiseled that concrete out of there? Could you still, go back in there? But at this point, it would be probably a massive challenge to get that concrete out of there. I'm sure you'd have to use jackhammers and everything else. And it would be a project fit for a contractor that would probably keep him busy for quite a while. So I doubt the day will ever come where that cave gets opened up again. But as I said, you can still go to the Whips Ledges in Hinckley, Ohio, and you can hike the trail up to the Whips Ledges. And if you go down to the south end, towards the south end of the ledges, up on the upper part of the ledges itself, you'll find Wildcat Cave. You can still find the cave opening there. It's a pretty big opening, and like I said, you can go back in to maybe 15-20 feet, and you can still see the concrete back in there where the rest of the cave is sealed off. So thankfully Morris was saved and lived happily ever after. Nobody knows whatever happened to him after that. There's no record of him anywhere. So Lord knows where he ended up. Little does he know he's still a celebrity of sorts to this day for those that visit the Wildcat Cave. But anyway, that was a part of my youth that I'll never forget. We crawled through a lot of those caves and never had any fear of getting caught, but I think we had enough sense to know where our limitations were and where not to go. Morris, he was, I guess you call him a city boy, so, not real educated on the dangers of crawling into a crevice like that. And then he found out the hard way that you get caught in there, it's not just a real easy extraction. It can be a pretty big deal. Well, that's my story for today. Thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel, and you can hear more stories. Till next time, cats, have a good one. Take it easy.